country, including many murderers and rapists.
About a third of our prison population who are illegal aliens.
Half of the kids in this country under 5 years old are minorities. White people are having fewer. Put it bluntly, we need more babies. I also know our country is on fire, and the fuel is illegal immigration.
And the chief of police in the small town under siege by the pro-illegal alien Open Borders lobby says his community is being overrun by criminal illegal aliens and drug gangs.
We are dealing with an illegal alien crime wave, and drug smuggling is just the beginning. Virginia.
We're not even gonna give these dudes too much burn. But basically, these dudes were so racist, a lot of these guys aren't even on TV anymore, okay? But what it does do is it leads and sets the stage, and we're running short on time, so we're not gonna go fully into it, but it sets the stage for this anti-immigrant sentiment that leads to the racist laws that they started in Arizona. Raise your hand if you're familiar with the laws in Arizona, that, okay, right? They basically legalized racial profiling of immigrant communities in Arizona. And that legislation was copied in states like Georgia, Washington. This conditions also led to this super attack against the DREAM Act, a common sense legislation to be able to provide college students with documents, okay? So, in the spirit of that, I wanted to shout out a lot of the Dreamer students that are here too, you know what I'm saying, for being valiant and taking that struggle up.
Definitely make some noise for them. And join them too.
So, yeah. All right, so we're going to see just a quick second on the media as well. We had attacks on immigrants, but we've been parallel seeing all these attacks on hip-hop, attacks on young students of color.
Bill O'Reilly and the Thursdays with Geraldo segment tonight, Virginia Tech, and a rapper who trades in violence. Last night we told you about a concert to welcome back students at VT, which will feature Nas, a rap guy with a rap sheet, a weapons conviction here in New York City. You may remember that a killer murdered 32 people on the campus of VT and wounded 26 others last April. So the booking of this guy Nas is incredible. Listen to this.
Out of wedlock births, black folks having babies not being married and stuff like that is out of control. And it's not because they lack material things, but because not all,
right,
but most of them lack moral character.
In the Impact segment tonight, last week, the principal of John Reynolds Elementary School in Philadelphia, Salome Thomas L., told us he believes gangster rap music is extremely harmful to his inner city students.
You have abortion out of control, Glenn, since the early 70s, over 15.
If I own Fox News, how do I make my money? My man Bo said the answer, but advertisements, right? Commercials. That's how you make your money when you run a media like Fox News. And if I'm consistently selling fear or propaganda, like the other brother said, more people are going to want to tune in. What am I going to have to be afraid of tomorrow? Today I need to fear immigrants. Today I need to fear young people of color being criminals. Okay, so we start to see how the media, especially after 1996, where there was an FCC rule change that allowed for the consolidation of increased media, and what we have today is a media that is consistently creating the scapegoat. Who are we going to have to blame for these stagnating wages, for this unemployment, for this crime that occurs, for all the alternative economies that emerge as a result of these lack of jobs? And we see that in the media, immigrant communities and young people of color have become those scapegoats. Last graph, I promise. Again, 1970 is an important year, the decade that hip-hop starts, and the decade that we've seen there's also a lot of changes that occur. So this is a graph of the prison population here in the United States. Up until 1970s, relatively stable. In 1970, we had a little less than 400,000 people incarcerated in the United States. Does anybody know what that number is at today? Almost 3 million. If you include the number of people on parole, probation, house arrest, or immigrant detention centers, that number is upwards of 12 million. All right, so we incarcerate more people in this country than some countries have populations. And it's important to note that the increase in this era of mass incarceration since the 70s is parallel to some of the graphs that we saw earlier, right? Stagnating wages, increase productivity, increase profits for corporations. All right? And Rod always, if you don't mind telling the piece about Interscope, I really enjoy that connection.
No, yeah, so we've been doing some research, right? Y'all ever heard of Interscope Records? Okay, so Interscope Records, they've been responsible. They brought us NWA, they brought us Tupac, okay? They brought us Eminem, right? 50 Cent. They recently just signed Chief Keef, right? If you look at historically in the history of hip hop, that's been the record label that's been associated with all the beefs that have existed in hip hop. So we do a little research. We always say you gotta follow the money. So guess who owns Interscope? Interscope Records, the larger company that owns them, is a company called GE, General Electric. General Electric is the largest corporation in the world. And at the same time, General Electric is the largest and biggest contributor to funding for the prison industrial complex. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not a scientist and I'm not a mathematician, but it don't take a genius to put two and two together and understand that the same folks that are funding the corporations that run the rap music industry are the folks that are funding the prison industrial complex. So essentially what you have is corporations that are funding music that ends up being pop jingles that promote the prison industrial complex, that promote behavior that gets our young people put in prison. Okay?
All right, so we see the increased criminalization of our immigrant communities, the increased criminalization of young people of color, right, of using hip-hop as a scapegoat. The same companies that are funding the rap music industry also funding private prisons and immigrant detention centers. It's easy to get bogged down. It's easy to feel a little
But let's
powerless.
talk about some solutions.
Let's talk about some solutions. That's what I want to get to. So we have the pleasure, we're going to bring up Claudia de la Cruz,
From the Urban Butterflies.
alumni, and also current professor here at John Jay. So make some noise for Claudia de la Cruz, please.
And look, one of the things that we do, that we always promote, which I think this is a perfect example of, is the idea that you can't just oppose, you gotta propose. Alright, so let's see if we can say that. You can't just oppose, you gotta propose. Okay? And we say that, of course, we MCs, we try to make it rhyme. But more than anything is the idea that you could identify the problem, but if you're not doing work towards providing a solution, then you're just as guilty as those that's making the problem happen. Okay, so we're gonna let the sisters share with us the stories of the Urban Butterfly, and then we're gonna come back and share some of the work that we've been doing in the South Bronx.
How's everyone doing? Good? Like Rod and G said, sometimes it's hard for us to listen to things like this and be all right. And I want to share with you that it's all right to be angry. You want to repeat that back to yourselves? It's all right to be angry. We have to be angry. There's something called righteous anger. And if we don't feel righteous anger when we see injustice, then there's something definitely wrong with us. Okay? And so what moved me to be able to start doing organizing work in the community that I was living in, because we do believe that we need to organize where we live, was having young people always tell me they were bored. How many of you get bored? Raise your hands. Why are you afraid? I ain't gonna scold you. All right. There's no reason for anybody on this planet to be bored. There's mad stuff to do. And if you don't have things to do, just holler at me afterwards. All right? Like, there's no reason for anyone to be bored. And so I had a whole bunch of young women who were coming to me saying, I'm bored. What can we do? And I was doing organizing work at the time in Washington Heights. And so we started having conversations around not empowerment, but empowerment. The empowerment that we have within to make the changes that we need to make for ourselves. And so we created what is called the Urban Butterflies Youth Leadership Development Project. We are an all-volunteer organization, is membership-based. It's definitely not a community-based organization. All the work that we do is grassroots work. So we don't get any funding that will limit our work in any way. So when I'm talking about all volunteer, I mean people knocking on doors to get $1 from the neighbors to be able to raise funds to make things happen. because our communities have the resources to invest in our communities. We named ourselves after the Mirabal sisters. Does anybody know who the Mirabal sisters are or were? Okay, so they were 3 sisters who started a movement against the Trujillo dictatorship in the Dominican Republic and were assassinated because of it. And so we understood that beyond talking about domestic violence, we needed to talk about state violence, and that we had a responsibility to fight back and develop strategies to be able to gain liberation from all these systems of oppression that the brothers were talking about earlier. And so we committed ourselves, and our mission is to gain gender equity, which is not the same thing as equality. Okay? Gender equity within a human rights framework in New York City. But we do local work with a global perspective. So we make the connections with what's going on in the Dominican Republic, what's going on in Puerto Rico, what's going on in Africa, what's going on in Asia, because we understand to be connected in struggle with those different parts of the world. All right, so what is a human rights framework? Every human being has the right to eat. Every human being has the right to housing. Every human being has the right to access education, to be able to work, to be able to have protection when they work. Every human being has the right to look for a dignified life. So when we talk about migration being illegal, there was no such a thing before geopolitics. Before people started colonizing, there was no such thing as immigration or illegal migration. Our human right to defend ourselves and our communities from all types of violence. So we do believe in self-defense. And we believe in self-defense, and I want to make the clarification. Sometimes when we defend ourselves, the state is very, very fast to say that we're being violent. Because the same thing happened with Malcolm X. People usually want to remember Malcolm X as someone who was angry all the time, and he was violent. And actually, if we look into history, he wasn't violent, and he wasn't promoting violence. He was promoting self-defense. As people who have the right to exist in the world, we have the right to defend ourselves. And so, how do we do this human rights framework? We look at all the intersectionalities that exist. So how many of us are females? How many of you are immigrants? How many of you consider yourselves black? How many of you consider yourselves Latinos or Latinas? How many of you consider yourselves from the working class? Most of you raised your hands more than once. Those are intersectionalities. Those are identities that are affected by systems of oppression like racism, like xenophobia, the hate of immigrants, or the fear of immigrants, homophobia, sexism, okay, because patriarchy does still exist. Racism, white supremacy, still exists. Understand that there are folks who do work to deal with immediate situations, and we support that type of work, and we have relationships with folks who do that. But when we talk about people power, we're talking about a process. We're talking about subversion. We're talking about transformation, where the people have the power to be able to be agents of their destiny. And so they don't need politicians to solve the problem, which they rarely ever do, right? And we know that. So we're talking about building that people power. We also acknowledge that youth are valuable resources. A lot of the times, there's ageism, where young people are told. I remember being young and having my mom saying in Spanish, "Los muchachos hablan cuando la gallina mea." So kids speak when the hens pee. The hens never pee, so we never talk. That was the saying in Spanish or in the Dominican Republic. So she used to say to me, you have that experience too, right? So we come from places where young voices aren't heard or valued, or their work isn't valued. And so we affirm within our space that youth are valuable resources. Communities are experts in our realities. We don't need to read a book about what we experience. We experience it every day. And so we have the power to develop solutions to it within our communities. No one needs to come into the community and say, well, we're going to empower you little powerless people. That's not how it goes. And last but not least, a woman's place is at the forefront of all struggles. We usually hear women's place is where? In the kitchen. Where else? In the bed. It's true. Why are you acting all shameful for? It's true. That's what it said. So we're saying a woman's place is in the creation of liberating experiences of all struggles. And so what do we do in order to build that? Well, we build capacity and develop leadership skills for young people to become peer educators, mentors, and organizers. And so if you see here, the young women often engage in reading circles to find meaning in what their experiences are, to analyze it, to be able to develop strategies. And then they go to schools like La Gregorio Luperón and work with younger kids in developing workshops with them and speaking with them about organizing practices and how they could feel the power to make the changes that they need to make. We do community organizing and mobilizing. And so we've done community organizing and mobilizing around different issues that are issues that affect the immigrant community. How many of you know people who've been stopped and frisked? How many of you have been stopped and frisked? All right, so we've done events, whether they are in forums or rallies around police brutality. We've done work around immigrant rights. We've done work around women's rights. And part of the organizing and mobilizing piece involves the educating the community. So we do engage in outreach. And we do engage in going to churches and going to CBOs and going to different places to be able to raise awareness, to be able to mobilize people. And we build community. We believe hardcore in building sisterhood. We need to build sisterhood. As women, we're often taught to compete. Who's prettier? Who has the bigger boobs? Who has the bigger butts? That is true, you know? And so what we try to do is deconstruct that and construct a space that is safe for women to love themselves as they are and work with other women and other folks in the community to build power. And so we build alliances with different organizations. I was mentioning earlier, we've been very, very blessed to be able to work with the New York State Leadership Council that does work with the Dreamers. They're actually led by Dreamers. And so in one of our most recent experiences, we've had young people who are graduating from high school and didn't know about deferred action. Didn't know what to do afterwards. They want to be able to access higher education, but since they're undocumented, they don't know what to do. And one of the things that we've been able to do is link those young people with Dreamers and folks that are doing organizing work, particularly around immigration. And so those alliances allow us to serve as a resource, allows the young women to be able to tell the parents, well, you know, there are limitations to this policy. Maybe you should push for this, mommy. They become the resources for the community, for their peers and for their parents. We've been lucky and blessed enough to work with cultural organizations. I'm also a member of the RDAC-DX, and G and Rod are going to talk a little bit more about that. And we've done work with cultural workers. So we do find that art, working through the arts, is a liberating experience for the young people, where they find tools to be able to express their experiences and themselves and find ways to fight back with and through the arts. And so we've done work. That upper picture right there was our participation at the Social Forum, right? In 2010, the U.S. Social Forum. And then down here we have Ana Maria Hoffman, who participates in DUB and has been influential in the development of the cultural work that we have been doing. And so one of the biggest alternatives that we think we have contributed has been the creation of a safe space. How many of you haven't felt safe at some point in your life? Safe to speak, safe to be, just haven't felt safe. And so that's a feeling that a lot of folks have and continue to have. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of safe spaces where young people can come together and talk and find solutions to personal and political problems. And so we've created a safe space. We all opened up in April. And since then, we've had different folks from different countries come. Like here, we had a friend from Colombia come in and have a conversation with us, mainly around hip hop and how hip hop has been doing resistance work in Colombia. We've had women from the Philippines, Asia, and Hawaii that have come in and done work with us. So we've created this safe space for exchanges, to build community, for folks to feel safe in that space. One thing that I want to make sure that folks take out of this also is that we're not exclusively a young women's project. It's led by young women, but we do have allies, male allies. And so we've had folks that have been with us through thick and thin and have a voice in the development of the project. The only thing is that women have the voting power. Sorry, guys. So again, it's one of the solutions to many of the problems, and like I said before, it's one of the solutions. There are many different projects that are geared specifically to work with folks around different issues. We are not an issue-based project. We are not an issue-based project, and I say that because we're always going to have issues. Our desire is to be able to create systematic responses to systematic oppression. So it's an ongoing process for us. I want to, pass back the mic to Rod and G, because they're going to be talking about RDAC BX for a little bit, and I know that there's a performance, and we're a little bit over time.
So we're going to wrap up the workshop real quick, as we're going to get to a performance we're about to rock right across this hall right here. What we want to show y'all real quick, and this is the last thing we're going to show you for the workshop, is the power that hip-hop has to go from one medium to the next. And what do we mean by that? In 2008, we opened up a community center, and on the rooftop of this hip-hop community space that we had, we basically started doing political murals. So we did one last year. This was the rooftop. It said Free Mumia 2012, Mumia Abu-Jamal being a political prisoner, former Black Panther out of Philadelphia. And eventually, this is the type of mural that led to our space being raided. We got raided in February of this year by the police, and they shut down the community space that we had. Before that, though, I want to share an experience that we had. We had a mural that said, "No human being is illegal." Right? So here you have the mural, right? Just so you get an idea, these letters are 12 feet tall, 70 foot wide mural. You can see it from the expressway that we showed earlier. So then after that, we're like, yo, we're gonna turn this mural into a t-shirt. So we made a t-shirt. Last summer we had the privilege of being able to perform and participate in a concert that featured Calle 13, who's one of the larger world music, artists out right now. So we walked up to him, we let him get the shirt, and before he hit the stage, he put on the No Human shirt. You can go to the next one, right? So it's a little dark, but you see him rocking a shirt. After that concert, the concert he did was in front of 10,000 people. The next morning, he was on the cover of the New York Times wearing that shirt. So just real quick, we made the connection. It went from a mural that was on a wall to a t-shirt on one of the world's, bigger music stars. And then next thing you know, you're on the cover of the New York Times. And it wasn't the idea of talking about immigration reform. It was no human being is illegal. A straight political statement that we stand by and that we believe in, but just another idea how hip-hop and culture can come together for immigrant rights. So we're going to leave it at that, and we're going to go across the hall, we're going to cross that way, and do what we do, which is perform and put on a hip-hop show. So hopefully y'all can join us. I appreciate y'all for being here with us. And that's what it is, y'all. Peace.